I still remember the smell of that airport terminal. Cinnamon pretzels and jet fuel. I was 5 years old, sitting on a plastic chair that was too big for me, swinging my legs back and forth because they didn't reach the ground. My mother told me to wait right there. She said she was going to get us some food. My father had already disappeared toward the bathrooms 20 minutes earlier. That was 32 years ago. I never saw them again. Not until 3 months ago, when they walked into a courtroom and sued me for $5.5 million. Let me start from the beginning. Detroit Metropolitan Airport, Gate C-17, March 14th. The year was 1993, and I was wearing a blue sweater with a cartoon dinosaur on it. My parents had told me we were going on vacation. I was excited because I had never been on a plane before. I had a small backpack with my favorite stuffed rabbit and a coloring book. My mother bought me a hot chocolate. I remember it was too hot and burned my tongue. She set it on the chair next to me and said she would be right back. She kissed my forehead. It was the last time she ever touched me. I waited for 2 hours. Airport security found me crying, clutching my backpack, the hot chocolate long since cold. They searched the entire terminal. They paged my parents over the intercom system. Margaret and David Chen, please return to Gate C-17. Your son is waiting for you. No one came. The police were called. Couldn't stop crying. I told them my name was Marcus Chen. I told them my address, but when they went there, the apartment was empty, completely empty. Not just moved out empty, but stripped bare empty. Like no one had ever lived there at all. They had planned this. Every detail, every moment. I spent the next 6 months in foster care. Therapists tried to help me understand. Social workers filed reports. Police investigated, but my parents had vanished without a trace. No credit card usage, no bank account activity, nothing. It was like they had been erased from existence. And then Robert Harrison entered my life. Robert was 58 years old when he adopted me. He was a corporate attorney who had never married, never had children. He told me later that he had been thinking about adoption for years, but never found the courage until he read about my case in the newspaper. He didn't try to replace my parents. He didn't force me to call him Dad. He just showed up day after day, week after week, being present, being kind, being the steady force I desperately needed. The first year was hard. I had nightmares every night. I would wake up screaming, convinced I was back in that airport terminal. Robert would sit with me in the dark, not saying much, just being there. Sometimes he would read to me until I fell back asleep. He taught me that love wasn't something you said. It was something you did. Every school play he attended. Every parent-teacher conference. Every baseball game where I sat on the bench and never played, he was there. Always there. Robert worked long hours at his law firm, but he never missed dinner with me. Never. He would come home, no matter how tired, and we would sit at the kitchen table and talk about our days. He asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. He treated me like I mattered. I asked him once why he chose me. I was 8 years old, still struggling with the abandonment, still wondering what was so wrong with me that my own parents could just walk away. He looked at me very seriously and said, "Marcus, I didn't choose you because you needed saving. I chose you because I needed you. You made my life complete." I didn't understand it then. I do now. Robert taught me everything. How to tie a tie, how to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook. But more importantly, he taught me about integrity, about showing up, about being the kind of man who keeps his promises. He put me through college, Northwestern University. I studied engineering. Robert would visit once a month, taking me out to dinner, asking about my classes, my friends, my life. He never missed a graduation, not from high school, not from college, not from my master's program. I met Sarah in graduate school. She was brilliant, funny, and patient with my trust issues. Robert loved her immediately. He told me privately that I had better not let this one get away. We got married 2 years later, and Robert walked me down the aisle. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. Sarah and I built a good life together. I became a civil engineer, working on infrastructure projects. She became a teacher. We bought a small house in Evanston. We talked about having kids someday. Robert would come over for Sunday dinners, bringing wine and terrible jokes and an endless supply of love. He was my father in every way that mattered. When Robert was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, my world shattered all over again. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 8. fighting every day, never complaining, never asking why this was happening to him. I spent every moment I could with him. Sarah understood. She would pack me dinner and send me to the hospital, knowing I needed this time. Robert and I talked about everything: his childhood, his career, his regrets, his joys. Me. He told me that adopting me was the best decision he ever made. He said I had given his life purpose and meaning. He said he was proud of the man I had become. He said he loved me. I told him I loved him too. I told him he saved my life. I told him he was my real father. He smiled and squeezed my hand and said, "I know, son. I know." Robert died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding his hand. Sarah was there too, crying quietly in the corner. His last words were, "Take care of each other." We did. The funeral was beautiful. Robert's law firm colleagues came, old friends, neighbors, people whose lives he had touched. I gave the eulogy, barely making it through without breaking down completely. Sarah stood next to me, her hand in mine, keeping me grounded. A week later, Robert's attorney contacted me about the reading of the will. His name was James Peterson, a partner at Robert's firm. He had kind eyes and a gentle manner. He invited Sarah and me to his office on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't expecting much. Robert had lived comfortably but not extravagantly. He had a nice house, some savings, his retirement accounts. I assumed he would leave me enough to pay for the funeral and maybe a small inheritance. I was wrong. James Peterson sat across from us in his mahogany office and opened a thick folder. He looked at me seriously and said, "Marcus, did Robert ever discuss his financial situation with you?" "Not really," I said. "He was private about money." James nodded. Robert was an extremely successful attorney, but more than that, he was an exceptional investor. He started with very little and built a substantial portfolio over his lifetime. He lived modestly and saved aggressively. Everything he did was with your future in mind. I felt Sarah's hand tighten around mine. James continued. Robert's estate is valued at approximately $6.2 million. After taxes and final expenses, you will inherit roughly $5.5 million. The house in Wilmette, its investment portfolio, everything. I couldn't breathe. Sarah gasped. $5.5 million. It was inconceivable. James wasn't finished. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "This is for you." Robert wrote it 2 weeks before he died. "I wanted you to read it after you learned about the inheritance." My hand shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Robert's careful handwriting. "My dear Marcus, if you are reading this, I am gone. I hope I gave you enough warning. I hope we had time to say the things that mattered. I hope you know how much I love you. This money is not just an inheritance, it is a foundation, a security, a promise that you will never have to worry about being abandoned again. You will never be alone. You will never be unsafe. Use it wisely. You'll build a beautiful life with Sarah. Have children and love them fiercely. Travel, dream, create. But most importantly, remember that your value has nothing to do with this money. Your value comes from who you are, kind, honest, good. You saved me, Marcus, not the other way around. You gave me purpose when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was too old to find it. You made me a father. I'm so proud of you. Love always, Dad." I read it 3 times before I could speak. Sarah was crying. James was quiet, letting me process. Finally, I looked up and said, "I don't know what to say." James smiled. "Robert knew you would say that. He left one more thing. Another envelope, smaller." He handed it to me. Inside was a key and a note. "Storage Unit 347. Bank of America Building. Downtown Chicago. I have been saving something for you." Sarah and I went to the storage unit the next morning. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor and found Unit 347 at the end of a long hallway. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside was a small space, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. But it wasn't full of furniture or boxes. It was full of memories. Photo albums lined one wall, dozens of them, one carefully labeled with dates. Opened the first one and saw pictures of myself at 5 years old, 6, 7. Robert had documented everything, every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary Tuesday afternoon. There were report cards, art projects, drawings I had made in elementary school, a macaroni necklace I had given him for Father's Day when I was 7. He had kept everything. But it was the filing cabinet that broke me. Sarah opened it while I was looking through the photo albums. She gasped and said, "Marcus, you need to see this." Inside the filing cabinet were folders, hundreds of folders, each one labeled with a date. Inside each folder were records. Robert had been searching for my biological parents for 27 years. He had hired private investigators. He had filed requests with law enforcement. It followed every lead, every rumor, every possibility. The folders contained interview transcripts, surveillance photos, dead ends, and new beginnings. He never told me. He never mentioned it once. The most recent folder was dated 3 weeks before his death. Inside was a single piece of paper, current address, Detroit, Michigan. Margaret and David Chin. He had found them, and he never said a word. I sat on the floor of that storage unit for an hour, reading through the files. Sarah sat next to me, silent, supportive, letting me process. Robert had found them 5 years ago, 5 years, and he never told me. The most recent investigator's report was thorough. Margaret and David Chen had been living in Detroit under assumed names for 15 years before returning to their real identities. They had moved frequently in the early years after abandoning me, staying off the grid, avoiding detection. They had no other children. They lived in a modest apartment. David worked in construction. Margaret was a waitress. They lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling with debt, barely making ends meet. The investigator's notes included an interesting observation. Subjects appear to have significant gambling debts. Multiple creditor calls observed. Eviction notice on apartment door dated last month. Robert had known all of this, and still he said nothing to me. I found a sealed envelope at the back of the filing cabinet. It was addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. Another letter. Marcus, if you are reading this, you have found my research. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I struggled with this decision for 5 years. I found them because I thought you deserved to know. I thought you deserved answers. But the more I learned about them, the more I realized they had nothing to offer you except more pain. They did not change. They did not grow. They did not regret. They simply survived, moving from one scheme to another, one crisis to another, never looking back at the child they abandoned. I decided not to tell you because I wanted to protect you. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe that was wrong. But I could not bear to watch you hurt again. If you choose to contact them, I understand. They are your biological parents, and you have every right to seek closure. But please, Marcus, protect yourself. You're not the people you hope they will be. You owe them nothing. Love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Sarah looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I said. "Part of me wants answers. Part of me wants to leave it alone." "We don't have to decide today," Sarah said. "We can take our time." She was right. We locked up the storage unit and went home. We didn't talk about it for 3 days. I went to work, came home, had dinner, went to bed. Normal life, safe life, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. It's Margaret and David Chen. My biological parents. People who left me in an airport terminal and never looked back. I needed to know why. I decided to write them a letter. Not a phone call, not a visit. Just a letter. Something I could control. Something I could revise and edit and make perfect. It took me 2 weeks to write. I went through dozens of drafts. Too angry, too desperate, too emotional. Finally, I settled on something simple. Dear Margaret and David, my name is Marcus Chen. You left me at Detroit Metropolitan Airport on March 14th, 1993. I was 5 years old. I am writing to let you know that I survived. I was adopted by a good man named Robert Harrison. He raised me, loved me, and gave me a life I could never have imagined. Robert passed away recently. Before he died, he left me information about your current whereabouts. I am not writing to accuse you or punish you. I am writing because I need to understand. Why did you leave me? What happened that day? If you are willing to provide answers, I would appreciate a response. If not, I understand. I will not contact you again. Marcus Harrison. I used Robert's last name. It felt right. I sent the letter on a Monday. Didn't tell Sarah. I didn't tell anyone. I just sent it and tried not to think about it. The response came 4 days later. It was a handwritten letter from Margaret. Her handwriting was shaky, unpracticed. The paper smelled like cigarette smoke. Dear Marcus, I cannot tell you how many times I have thought about you over the years. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder what happened to you. I am so relieved to know you are alive and well. Your father and I were very young when you were born. We were not prepared to be parents. We were struggling financially. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes. Leaving you at the airport was the hardest thing I ever did. But we believed you would be better off without us. We believed you would find a better life. I am glad we were right. I am glad Robert found you. I am glad you had a good life. I would very much like to see you, to talk to you, to explain everything in person. David feels the same way. We understand if you are not ready. We understand if you never want to see us. But the door is open if you want to walk through it. With love, your mother. I read the letter 5 times. Sarah found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at it. She read it over my shoulder and said, "How do you feel?" "I don't know," I said. "Part of it feels genuine. Part of it feels manipulative." "Do you want to see them?" Sarah asked. "I think so," I said. "I think I need to," Sarah nodded. "Okay, but I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Detroit. Neutral territory. Public space. Safe. I told them I would be there on a Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I gave them a description of what I looked like. Tall, dark hair. I would be wearing a blue jacket. Sarah and I drove to Detroit the night before and stayed in a hotel. I barely slept. I rehearsed what I would say, what I would ask, how I would react. When we walked into the coffee shop, I knew them immediately. They were sitting at a corner table, looking nervous and out of place. They looked older than I expected. Worn down, tired. Margaret saw me first. She stood up, her hand over her mouth, tears already falling. David stood too, more hesitant, uncertain. I walked over slowly. Sarah stayed close. "Marcus," Margaret said. Her voice was shaking. "Oh my God, Marcus, you're so tall. You're so handsome." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there. "Please, sit down," David said. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving us this chance." We sat. There was an awkward silence. Sarah ordered coffee for us. Small talk, weather, traffic, anything to fill the void. Finally, Margaret started crying harder. David looked down at his hands. "We were young," David said. "We were stupid. We thought we were doing the right thing. Leaving a 5-year-old child alone in an airport was the right thing." I said. My voice was sharper than I intended. "We were desperate," Margaret said. "We had gambling debts. Dangerous people were looking for us. We thought if we disappeared, you would be safe. You would go into the system and find a family who could take care of you properly. So you planned it," I said. "You stripped the apartment. You bought tickets you never intended to use. You waited until I was distracted and you ran." "Yes," David said quietly. "We did." "Did you ever look back?" I asked. "Did you ever wonder what happened to me? Did you ever try to find out if I was okay?" Margaret sobbed. "We were scared. We thought if we came back, we would put you in danger. We thought staying away was protecting you." "For 32 years, I said. "You protected me for 32 years. "We made a mistake," David said. "We know that now. We've regretted it every single day." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe they had suffered, that they had changed. They were different people now. But something felt off. The way they looked at each other, the way they shifted in their seats, the rehearsed quality of their answers. "I have one more question," I said. "If I had never contacted you, would you have ever reached out to me?" They looked at each other again. A long pause. "We thought about it," Margaret said. "But we didn't know how. We didn't know if you would want to hear from us." "That wasn't the question I asked," I said. "Would you have reached out?" Another mose. "Probably not," David admitted. "We assumed you hated us. We assumed you had moved on." I nodded slowly. I stood up. Sarah stood with me. "Thank you for your honesty," I said. "I appreciate you meeting with me. I got the answers I needed." "Wait," Margaret said. "Please don't go. We want to be part of your life. We want to know you. We want a second chance." "I'm not sure that's possible," I said. "Please, Marcus," she said. "We're your parents. We made a mistake, but we're still your parents." "No," I said quietly. "You're not. Robert Harrison was my father. You are the people who abandoned me. I walked out of the coffee shop. Sarah followed. We got in the car and drove back to Chicago in silence. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 months later, I received a certified letter. It was from a law firm in Detroit, Patterson and Associates, representing Margaret and David Chen in a civil lawsuit against Marcus Harrison. They were suing me for $5.5 million. The grounds: filial responsibility, elder care, emotional damages. The legal argument was complex, but the basic premise was simple. I was their biological child. They were aging and in need of financial support. I had recently inherited significant wealth. Therefore, I owed them. The lawsuit claimed they had made financial sacrifices to give me up for adoption. They had suffered emotional trauma from the separation. They were entitled to compensation for their suffering and support in their declining years. I couldn't believe it. I read the lawsuit 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. But no, they were actually suing me. The parents who abandoned me at 5 years old were now demanding I give them the inheritance from the man who actually raised me. Sarah was furious. "This is insane," she said. "This is absolutely insane. They can't do this." "Apparently they can," I said. I called James Peterson, Robert's attorney. He was already aware of the lawsuit. He had been served as well as the executor of Robert's estate. James was calm and professional. "This is a frivolous lawsuit," he said. "Has no legal merit. Filial responsibility laws exist in some states, but not in the way they're claiming. And even if they did, the circumstances of your case make this unconscionable. Can they win?" I asked. "No," James said. "But they can make it expensive and painful. Legal fees, time, stress. That's what they're counting on. They're hoping you'll settle just to make it go away." "I won't settle," I said. "Not a dollar, not a cent." "Good," James said. "Then let's fight this." James hired a forensic investigator to look into Margaret and David's finances and background. What we discovered was worse than I imagined. They had a long history of financial fraud, bankruptcy, evictions, small cons, and schemes. Wow. They had declared bankruptcy twice. They owed money to multiple creditors. They were facing eviction from their apartment. More importantly, the investigator found something crucial. 3 weeks before they met with me at the coffee shop, they had consulted with an attorney about filial responsibility laws. They had asked specifically about whether an adopted child could be sued by biological parents for financial support. The meeting at the coffee shop wasn't about reconciliation. It was reconnaissance. They needed to confirm I had inherited money. They needed to appear sympathetic and caring to establish a relationship before filing suit. The tears, the apologies, the claims of regret. All of it was theater. The investigator found more. Emails between Margaret and David discussing the inheritance, how much they could sue for, what percentage they could settle for, how to play the emotional angle. One email from Margaret to David stood out. "He seems like a soft target. Guilt over not helping his real parents. Can work with that." I felt sick reading it. Not because I was surprised, but because some small part of me had still hoped they were telling the truth, that they had actually felt something, that I had mattered to them at all. James compiled everything into a legal response. We filed a motion to dismiss. We included evidence of their fraud. We included the emails. We included everything. The case went to court. The trial was set for a cold day in January. It's almost exactly 1 year after Robert's death. Sarah took the day off work. James Peterson represented me. Margaret and David's attorney was a low-rent ambulance chaser named Frank Patterson, who specialized in nuisance lawsuits. The courtroom was small and nearly empty. Just the judge, the lawyers, the plaintiffs, the defendant, and a court reporter. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Reynolds. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and fair. Patterson opened with an emotional appeal. He painted Margaret and David as victims, poor parents who made a desperate choice. Parents who never stopped loving their son. Parents who deserved to be cared for in their old age. He argued that I had a moral and legal obligation to support them. That Robert's inheritance was, in essence, their inheritance too, since they had given me up so that I could have a better life. It was nauseating. James Peterson stood up for my defense. He was calm, measured, and devastating. He presented the evidence chronologically. The abandoned child at the airport. the years of foster care trauma, Robert's adoption, and decades of love and support. The inheritance earned through Robert's hard work and careful planning. Then he presented the emails, the consultation with the attorney, the calculated meeting at the coffee shop, the complete absence of any attempt to contact me in 32 years until after they learned about the money. "Your Honor," James said, "this is not a case about filial responsibility. This is a case about exploitation. The plaintiffs are not seeking support. They are seeking a payday. They abandoned their child and are now attempting to profit from the generosity of the man who actually raised him." Judge Reynolds listened carefully. She asked pointed questions. She reviewed the evidence. She was particularly interested in the timeline. The fact that they had never attempted contact until after Robert's death. The fact that they had consulted an attorney before meeting with me. Patterson tried to argue that the emails were taken out of context, that Margaret and David were simply exploring their legal options, that they genuinely wanted a relationship. Judge Reynolds was not convinced. She called a brief recess. When she returned, her decision was swift. "I have reviewed all the evidence presented," she said. "I have considered the arguments from both sides. This case is without merit." She looked directly at Margaret and David. "You abandoned your 5-year-old child in an airport terminal. You made no attempt to ensure his safety or well-being. You disappeared for 32 years. And now, upon learning that he has inherited money from the man who actually raised him, you seek to claim that money as your own. This is not filial responsibility. This is greed, pure and simple." She turned to me. "Mr. Harrison, I am sorry for what you have endured, both as a child and now as an adult. You owe these people nothing, not financially, not emotionally, not morally." She banged her gavel. "Case dismissed. With prejudice. Additionally, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay all legal fees and court costs incurred by the defendant. This lawsuit was frivolous and filed in bad faith." It was over. Margaret started crying. Not tears of sadness, tears of frustration, of rage. She stood up and pointed at me. "You ungrateful piece of trash," she screamed. "We gave you life. We gave you everything." Security moved toward her. David pulled her back. They were escorted out of the courtroom, Margaret still yelling, still accusing me of being selfish and cruel. I sat there, numb. Sarah squeezed my hand. James smiled. "It's over," he said. "You won." But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like mourning. The lawsuit cost Margaret and David everything. The court ordered them to pay $73,000 in legal fees and costs. Money they didn't have. They declared bankruptcy again. They lost their apartment. Last I heard, they had moved to Florida to live with David's brother. I didn't feel victorious. Felt empty. Sarah and I went home that night and sat in silence. Finally, she said, "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I said, "but also sad." I kept hoping, even after everything, that there was some small part of them that actually cared, that actually felt something. "I know," Sarah said. "I'm sorry I thought about Robert, about his decision not to tell me he had found them, about his letter warning me that they would only bring more pain. He was right. He was protecting me, even from beyond the grave." I went back to the storage unit a week later. I spent hours going through Robert's files, reading his notes, following his investigation, seeing how hard he had worked to find answers while simultaneously trying to shield me from the truth. There was one final folder I hadn't opened. It was marked Final Instructions. Inside was a legal document, notarized and witnessed, dated 2 weeks before Robert's death. It was a declaration, statement to be used in the event that Margaret and David Chen ever attempted to contact me or make claims against the estate. Robert had anticipated this. Everything. The lawsuit, manipulation, greed. He had prepared a defense for me before he even died. The document outlined his research, his findings, his legal opinion that Margaret and David had forfeited all parental rights through their actions. It included testimony from psychologists about the trauma of abandonment. It included financial records proving Robert was the sole source of the inheritance. But it was the final paragraph that broke me. "To whom it may concern, Marcus Harrison is my son in every way that matters. He is not a product of biology or accident. He is a product of choice, love, and commitment." Any attempt to claim otherwise is an insult to the years we spent building a family together. I will not allow anyone, living or dead, to take that away from him. Signed, Robert Harrison. I sat in that storage unit and cried. Not for Margaret and David, not for the lawsuit, but for Robert. For the man who loved me so completely that he tried to protect me even after he was gone. It's been 6 months since the trial. Sarah and I are doing well. We used part of the inheritance to pay off our house. We set up college funds for the children we hope to have someday. We donated a significant amount to foster care organizations in Robert's name. We kept the rest invested, just like Robert would have wanted. Building security, building a future. I think about Margaret and David sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I wonder if they ever truly understood what they did. I wonder if they ever felt genuine remorse, or if it was always just about the money. I'll never know. I've made peace with that. I visit Robert's grave every Sunday. I bring flowers. I tell him about my week. Tell him about Sarah, about work, about life. I tell him thank you, over and over again. Because he gave me everything. Not the money, not the house, not the material things. He gave me the knowledge that I was worth loving, that I was worth fighting for, that I deserved to be chosen. Margaret and David taught me what it meant to be abandoned. Robert taught me what it meant to be found. The inheritance was never about the money. It was about legacy. About proving that love isn't measured in biology or blood. It's measured in presence, in consistency. In the small daily acts of showing up. Robert showed up. Every single day. For 27 years he chose me, over and over again. That's the inheritance that actually mattered. I wrote one more letter after the trial. I never sent it, but I needed to write it anyway. For closure. For healing. For myself, dear Margaret and David, you asked me once if I hated you. I said I didn't know. I've thought about that question a lot since the trial. I don't hate you. Hate requires a level of emotional investment I simply don't have. You are strangers to me. You always were. What I feel is pity. You had a child and you threw him away. You had 32 years to change, to grow, to become better people. You didn't. You became exactly who you were always going to be. You thought the inheritance was the prize. You thought the money was what mattered. You were wrong. The real inheritance was Robert. The real prize was being loved unconditionally by a man who chose me every single day. That's worth more than any amount of money. You could have had that too. You could have been the parents who struggled but fought to keep their child. You could have been the parents who made mistakes but worked to rebuild. You could have been the parents who showed up even when it was hard. Instead, you were the parents who walked away, and then walked back only when you thought there was something in it for you. I feel sorry for you, because you missed out on knowing me. Not because I'm special or important, but because I was your child, and you never even tried to love me. Robert tried every single day, and that made all the difference. I hope you find peace someday. Hope you find a way to live with what you've done. But I won't be part of that journey. I've already spent enough of my life dealing with your choices. I'm done now. I'm moving forward. With Sarah, with the family we're building, with the love Robert taught me to recognize and cherish. You taught me what to avoid. Robert taught me what to become. Thank you for that lesson. It's the only thing you ever gave me that had any value. Goodbye, Marcus Harrison. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Someday, maybe I'll send it. Maybe I won't. It doesn't matter. Writing it was enough. Sarah and I have 2 children now. Emma is 3. No. Michael is 1. They are beautiful and perfect and loved beyond measure. I tell them about their grandfather Robert. I show them pictures. I read them the letters he wrote to me. I make sure they know who he was and what he meant. Mem asked me once where my mommy and daddy are, ones who made me. I told her they went away a long time ago, but I found a better daddy, a daddy who chose me, a daddy who loved me. She thought about this very seriously. Then she said, I'm glad you found him, because then you found mommy, and then you made me. Yes, I said, exactly. We live in Robert's house now. It's the one he left me. We painted the walls and updated the kitchen and filled it with toys and laughter and life. Gosh, Emma has Robert's old office as her playroom. Michael will get the guest room when he's older. Every night after we put the kids to bed, Sarah and I sit in the living room and talk about our day, just like Robert and I used to do. It's a tradition I'll never break. I keep Robert's letters in a safe in the basement. All of them. Someday when Emma and Michael are older, I'll show them. I'll let them read the words of a man who understood what it meant to be a real father. I never heard from Margaret or David again after the trial. I assume they're still alive somewhere, still struggling, still making the same choices they always made. I don't think about them much anymore. They're like characters in a story I heard once. Distant, disconnected, irrelevant. But Robert is everywhere. In the way I read to Emma before bed. In the way I show up to Michael's doctor appointments. In the way I tell Sarah I love her every single day. In the way I choose to be present, to be consistent. To be the father my children deserve. That's Robert's real legacy, not the money, not the house, not the material things. The knowledge that love is a choice. And I choose it every single day, just like he chose me.